Whether you're a new real estate investor just taking down your first property or an experienced veteran with thousands of units under your belt, operating your multifamily deal is the make or break point for building wealth. Welcome to this Property Operations Miniseries, part of the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast. This miniseries is hosted by my friend Jack Petrick and, of course, by me, Agostino Pintus, the host of Bulletproof Cashflow. In this miniseries, we'll cover what you do after you take down that deal and what it's going to take to become a successful property owner that you want to be. So let's go ahead and get into the show. Hey guys, thank you very much for joining us on our mini series on property management. So as I mentioned, Jack is back here, Jack Petrick, and he is back on the episode. And today we're going to talk about how to hire a property manager. As we covered in the last episode, we're talking about what to do after you buy. There's a very high level touch point around that. And I think as we keep on going through our show list here for this mini series, we're going to start getting into some of the nitty gritty and some of the details that you're going to need to know on how to handle your post-purchase property management side and operational side of things. So, hiring a property manager, I say, is where you make your money. That is ultimately what it is. It's actually when you're putting your team together, in my opinion, that is the first person you need. You don't need an attorney. You don't need a CPA. You don't need any of that stuff. You need a great property manager. I mean, I have some personal rules around that, but I know, Jack, you've worked with property management before. I think at this point, you've built your own team, right?
Exactly. So initially starting off in the business, I did everything myself. And what came out of that is a lot of experience, a lot of lessons, and a lot of lost money. And in those lessons of lost money, it also created what has to happen to have things running correctly. We were just talking to my wife. We've got a nurse practitioner business, and we're looking to hire a builder full time. And right now, one of my blind sides right now is I don't know how to appropriately interview a builder because I've never been a builder. So how do I decide if they're good or bad? So I think one of the things that you have to realize is the more knowledge and experience you have, the better you're going to be in evaluating the performance of that property manager. So property management, you're absolutely correct. Money is made in operations. The purchase price is part of it. We always say, buy right, sell high, and there's some truth to some extent with that. But at the same time, 75% of your results in this business is going to be by buying the right property with the right management. You can overcome so many deficiencies, mistakes, money lost, and this and that if you have the right property with the right management team. Because that property manager is going to be so critically tied to your success. The tenants that they move in. Do you mind if we talk about we'll get to that the next one. But yeah, the management is so critical. And we talked about, we basically have two options. We have either we could do it in-house with our own team or we can do third party. I personally have my own team at this point. I went the route of going third party and I was not able to lock in those right people. Augustine, I think this is going to be a hard comment to make, but most third-party property managers don't provide the service that's going to allow our properties to cash flow. Would you say that that's accurate?
100%. You have two opposing point of views where you as the owner, you're trying to maximize your profits so you can, if you have investors, you can pay your investors and make some money. It's diametrically opposed to what a property manager is doing. They're trying to maximize their profits and they're going to try to suck as much money out of the asset as they can. You have two opposing views on the same asset.
And then you also have the third opposing view where you have the tenant that wants everything done to the property too. So they're stuck between us, they're stuck between the tenant, they're stuck between investors, and then what the city wants, depending, the challenges of the city. So, and I will give full credit to property managers. They have a hard position. Like they're getting pulled in every direction. There's not a ton of compensation into it. And they have to deal with a lot of people, and just dealing with a lot of people is a lot of drains because tenants feel the right that they can just vomit on their property manager and just chew them out, or and so in respect to them, it's a very difficult position.
Yes, absolutely. But I'll say this, when it does come to hiring that property manager, like I touched on earlier, it is the key person that you need to have on your team. not an attorney, not a CPA, not an inspector, none of that stuff, not the lender. They're important. At your very first person you're going to talk to is a property manager, not just any property manager, because I'll get property managers that message me all the time. Hey, I want your business. Hey, I want to manage your deals. Hey, I'm new to the space. Can I manage your properties? The answer is no. The answer is no, you can't. Okay. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're going to, first off, you're building a relationship with a property manager that knows that area and knows that space. And for me, we partnered up with a property manager that knows Ohio, and the brokers know him, and he knows the brokers, right? There's a relationship there already. And because it's an older property management company, 30 plus years, whenever I go call a broker and I say, hey, Joe, I'm interested in buying this asset, the first question they're going to ask is, who's your property manager? Usually it's the first question. And they'll say, yeah, I'm working with Gary over at ABC Commercial. And they're like, oh, I know Gary. Gary's a good guy. Boom, you're in, right? If I said, yeah, I'm working with Joe over at XYZ, they're like, who's that? And who's this other company? Oh, they just opened last week. No credibility. And in this business, it's all about credibility. And the second you throw something out there that is not with that doesn't reflect you as someone that can do the job or do the deal, you're done. You lost the deal. You're done.
For sure. And the challenge is you have two options. You go third party, or you can go building your own management team. If you're just starting off, you have a small property, that's probably not going to be your initial option to go that. So, oftentimes it's easy to say, well, I'll just rely on the experts. And every time I've had an interview with a property manager, they also have to have a sales component like any business does. And they have to sell themselves.
Yeah.
And pretty much almost every conversation I've ever had has been a great conversation. A lot of expectations are set, and then once we get into the deal, rarely are those expectations hit. So one of the things that I found is if you're starting off with a third-party property manager, start slow in the relationship. So in one of the deals we did, we actually started off the property manager initially as a leasing agent, because here's the deal: if they can't lease, there's no value to it. There's really no value to you on the other side. So start slow. Before you get fully in bed with them, start off with leasing and see how their success is. And if they're successful at leasing those properties, then that's probably a good indication to go to step 2. But if they can't lease the properties like we experienced with this other company, and we took that step and we ended up not hiring them, that was the best decision we could have done. We end up, and on top of it, sometimes a property manager will, for the simplicity of their business, they will be renting out units less than what you can probably get for market value. And it will crush your refinance and the cash flow of that property. Sometimes due to laziness and not want to try to push an extra $50, $75 a month when the market would vary. So that's been a good way for us to kind of transition into it. Another thing that's challenging for property management companies, and this is something to be aware of as you're evaluating this, it's a very challenging business to be profitable with, because they're constantly, their income grows, now they need more staff. Income grows, more clients need more staff. More maintenance guys that have to come on, more leasing agents. Mm-hmm. And then they have the same issues we have. Sometimes they hire the right people, sometimes they don't. And when we have ineffective leasing agents that come into a property, or ineffective property managers that came on to run your multi-million-dollar property, and they're getting paid a very small salary, and they're turning off tenants, they're frustrating the relationship, they're not driving traffic, and they're causing your property to fail. And if you're not paying attention to that and being aware of it, and you're being complacent, and you just have your back turned, just checking what you're cashing checks each month they come in, you're going to fail in that. So even if you hire a third-party manager, you have a fiduciary responsibility, especially if you have capital raised to investors, to track the progress, their KPIs, and actually be at the property. Like, you can't figure this out necessarily always with phone calls. If you're buying out of state, there's going to be some challenges, but if you're buying a multi-million-dollar property, somebody's got to physically go there and check the accountability of what's being said, what's getting done, and you can't do that over the phone. You have to keep your eye on that property. And if you try to run it that way, you will fail.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And another key aspect you touched on, which I think is another part that people underestimate when it comes to management, is that if anybody's followed the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast, they'll know that I talk a lot about sales, right? In our line of work, when we're trying to raise capital for a deal, it's a sales job, right? We are putting together a story, and we're trying to get investors engaged with what we're saying and to believe in us and to believe into the deal and of course invest. The same thing needs to happen with property management, where you're always trying to woo that tenant. And you'd be surprised how many people just don't do that. How many property managers don't do that? Like for instance, let's say for instance, someone comes in to look at an asset, look at a unit rather. So it's November and a person comes in, they like the unit, but they ended up renting somewhere else, right? If they've acquired all their information, all the contact information, there should be a phone call happening by July. Hey, Mr. Smith, you were looking at one of our units last year. How about if you come on in and check us out today? You know, because we have some refurnished units and they look really great, and I think you might like them. You liked it last time, you know, why don't you give us a shot? I mean, I would just, you know, obviously it's not a crafted sales pitch, but you get my drift, is that many of those systems and processes in place that a good property management company will do, many of them don't actually do that. And that is key to getting new tenants and getting new and keeping your place full, right? And
sure, and that's a great point you just made there, because when you're buying an asset, especially if it's a value-add opportunity or it's a distressed asset, there is so much more time that is needed than what a typical third-party manager is going to provide.
Yep.
Typically, I'm not saying all, but most third-party managers are going to they're going to collect rent, put 3-day notices out, and just take care of emergencies.
That's it. That's what they'll do.
And that may work if you have a stabilized property and you've done all your turnovers and you're now running where you're running in your prime. But when you're in that period, and typically, I think you can attest this, Agostino, we're not buying properties at that point.
No.
We're buying here, and it's thousands of hours to get them to where they're running. And in that gap of those thousands of hours, there is a lot more involvement that needs to going into units, seeing what the issues are, exterminators that are needed. What are the frustrations of the tenants? You got to have those conversations. You got to build rapport. And when a property manager can build rapport with a tenant, they are far more likely to stay than when there's a disconnection and a frustration. Because when that happens, they're out of there. When they're out of there, the unit's empty. You now have to turn it, new carpeting, repaint it. When turnover is our highest cost. It is absolutely. And the more time we spend, there's that saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The amount of miscommunications I even had in my company today because of text messages is just unbelievable. When we can get face-to-face or on a call, we can go down rabbit trails and get to the source of an issue, the problem, to determine that so much more effectively. So, we're going in a different transition of communication, but that's just one thing I wanted to add to our conversation, that has so much influence on communication breakdown and keeping tenant satisfaction. Because operations where money's being made. Other things that I need from an on-site property manager is to help, run the job site, keep accountability of what's getting done and what's not getting done, because they have a non-biased set of eyes. If you have a project manager and you're just relying on them for updates, you're not always going to get the most honest evaluation of what's going on. The property manager is going to be pretty brutally honest. They were here, they weren't, it looks great, it looks terrible. And ultimately, they have to, the quality, they have to explain that to the tenants. So they don't want to have to go and say, well, this is sloppy, that's sloppy. They're going to hold things at a high accountability level, even if they don't have an experience in construction. It's common sense. Either it looks good or it doesn't. So there is so much more work that's involved. So much more work than what you're getting out of a third-party management option, especially if it's a value-add deal or if there's a lot of neglect to the property. Somebody has got to be there to be involved, to keep their eyes on everything.
Yeah, and we're going to cover some of that stuff too. So, all right, guys, that wraps up this part of the session. We're going to get into the next one, talking about leasing. So for the time being, if you have any questions, please go to bulletproofcashflow.com. There you can ask a question. You see a little widget. You click that widget. You can actually record your question right there on the website. And if we use your question on the air in upcoming shows, we'll send you a free gift. It's going to be awesome. Wait till you see this stuff. You're going to love it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next one. All right.